Contestant number 0, would you like me to repeat the question? There were tallies carved into my flesh. I stopped counting when they surpassed 1 million. 1 million cuts. 1 million questions. 1 million times I tried to die. My clothes were filthy, shredded, and glued to my skin. I wanted to scream, but my mouth was restricted. I wanted to cry, but if I did, I would be punished. How long had it been since I ate, drank, bathed? Across from me, Ella was trembling behind her podium, lit by neon light, her eyes unseeing, lips curved into a silent cry. If I didn't open my mouth in the next 30 seconds, we were doomed. I risked a glance at Deju, who was trying not to fall asleep, half-lidded eyes flickering. It was really hard not to look at the giant cavern in his chest where his heart had been yanked out. Deju's punishment for not knowing who sang the song, Baby One More Time. Unfortunately, Ella also landed on the Gravival prize, contestant number 0. Straightening up, I smiled widely at the cameras, trying to ignore the iron chains wrapped around my ankles. The answer is Ryan Reynolds. Sting, that's 100 correct answers in a row. The host turned to the imaginary audience, and I had the sudden, overwhelming urge to break the monitor, playing fake applause. The large screen above us lit up with personalized prizes. I almost collapsed when I saw death. If I played my cards right, I could finally die. All of us could die. All right, to win all of these prizes, you must answer the golden question. She winked. However, this time, you have the ability to ask a friend. No. Deju's frenzied eyes found mine. Skip it. Shut up, Deju, Ella hissed. Can't you see what they're offering? It's clearly a trap. He slammed his buzzer, struggling in his own chains. I'm okay. I can answer it this time. I tried to smile at my fellow contestants, but they refused to look me in the eye. Deju glared down at his podium, shaggy dark hair obscuring his face. Ella pretended to inspect her fingernails, but she was shaking. Well, all right. The host giggled. Why don't we bring back Chloe? A body bag was dragged in. Inside were the remnants of Clue, contestant 6, who was force-fed battery acid for losing 600K. Clue's body was thrown in front of me. The dead boy's eyes flickered open, confused. Okay, contestant number 0, for $7 million and all prizes on screen, please answer the golden question. If you need help, I will allow you to pass the question to contestant number 6. Deju Face planted his buzzer. We're so fucked. The host's smile widened, stretching unnaturally across her face. Contestant number 0, alias Connor, what was the name of the child the 6 of you brutally murdered? Hilda was 7 years and 4 months old. This last detail was of importance to her, as it proved she was the older one in her group of friends. She liked the hierarchy advantage that came with it, and used it when she needed a reason for the others to listen to her. Hilda, look. That was Amik, Hilda's best friend. She was pointing her finger at Pim Johnserton on the other side of the park. Pim was about to run straight into one of the benches. Thanks to Amik, Hilda turned to look just in time to watch the whole scene unfold. That's what you get for running while looking the other way like that. Hilda managed to say amidst all the laughter. Who cares? Said Amik as she kept laughing. It was common for Amik to make these sorts of remarks, but Hilda didn't mind. She actually agreed with her. She barely managed to keep it together when she saw Amik's finger pointing straight out at someone like that. If it hadn't been for Pim's whole stunt distracting her, the words, "Don't do that," would have come out of her mouth almost with a life of their own, and she hated that. Truth be told, Hilda's mom was very strict with some things. In general, everything at home was fine most of the time, but her mom would just be so annoying about particular habits. Hilda used to do as Amik and point with her finger a lot. She wasn't very good at communicating, so she would constantly point at things and people to get her point across, to be understood. Hilda's mom hated it when she did that. "We don't do that," she would say with words sharp as knives. She controlled herself when Hilda was younger, but as she grew, she showed her true disgust for this gesture more and more. Now, she grabbed Hilda's wrist before she could even raise her arm and gave her a look that could kill. "We don't." Do that, she would say, as if stabbing Hilda with each word. Still, Hilda didn't hate her mum for it. She is usually so nice and normal, you know, she would tell Amek sometimes. It's like some things just flip a switch on her. The part that made Hilda feel for her mother, though, was whenever she would say, "Don't ever let your grandfather see you do that, you hear me?" Hilda had it rough, but she knew by now that her mother probably had it worse. Her mother made it clear plenty of times that it would be much, much worse if it were her grandfather and not her mother who saw her pointing her finger like that. She could sometimes even feel some sort of pain in her mother's voice. "I think it was worse for her, being a kid with my grandpa as her father," she would tell Amek. "Why are your folks like this, though? It's just so weird. Why do they even care so much?" was what Amek had to say to that. Her family was very different from Hilda's. Hilda loved that Amek was like this. It made her feel like things were normal, at least when they were at school. How long had it been since she last dared to disobey her mum and just be free like Amek? When was the last time she just pointed her finger at someone when she felt like it, like she did when she was younger? She unconsciously grabbed her wrist at this thought. That Saturday morning, as she ate her cereal and laughed a little, remembering how Pim Johnston fell running into that bench, Hilda's mum walked in. "How's the cereal, love? Remember, we have to be at Grandma and Grandpa's house by lunch. I want to buy a couple of things at a local boutique there, and it takes us an hour to get there by car. Don't take too long on that cereal or we won't make it on time. There's lots to do," she said without waiting for a response as she dashed away. In the car, Hilda couldn't stop thinking about Pim's fall, but that was just a lie she told herself every now and then to feel better. What she really couldn't stop thinking about was a mic. Her finger pointed freely, without a care in the world, in Pim's direction. How long had it been since she was free like that? Since she didn't care this much about her mum and what she had to say about it. "Let's go, hun. Grab something nice for yourself while I get what we need to bring over to Grandma and Grandpa's place, okay?" said Hilda's mum. They were at the boutique already. Hilda wandered through the aisles looking for something yummy. She found a couple of things she liked and walked back to where her mum was. She tossed the items into her mum's basket and stood next to her while she talked to someone she seemed to know. On the other side of the store, a man talked on the phone with his back turned to them. He was a bit loud and moved his free hand around while he talked. "I want to do it," Hilda thought. Just like that, while her mother was distracted, she quietly raised her arm and pointed at the man. For a brief moment, she felt bliss and a wave of liberation, but it didn't last long. As if he knew, the man turned his head and looked straight at Hilda. She knew something was wrong. The man didn't turn around, only his head did. Time seemed to stop. The man's eyes, abnormally open, looked straight into Hilda's eyes. She couldn't look away. The rest of the man's face was expressionless. Hilda started feeling the air around her turn cold. A chill ran through her spine. The man started slowly tilting his head sideways, and as he did so, his mouth began drooping down at the corners. Her heart was beating fast. She felt like, no matter how fast she breathed, enough air just wouldn't go into her lungs. When the corners of the man's mouth had gone far too down, Hilda was already sweating. His head was about to be completely horizontal. "Hilda!" Her mum scowled at her as she grabbed her wrist. How long had it been? What happened to the man? Hilda looked. He was talking on the phone with his back turned to them, just like before. What just happened? Did she imagine it all? Hilda quickly looked at her mum. The woman looked back at her daughter for a very brief moment, and without letting go of her wrist, she dropped the shopping basket and bolted out of the store. "Get in the car. We need your grandfather, now." Knock. Knock, knock. I sit up from my not-so-comfortable futon and stare at the door. I've only been in town a day, no friends, no job, no one who should even know that I'm here. So, my curiosity was piqued with the thought of who could possibly be knocking at my door. I make my way to the door using cautious steps. A million possibilities of who could be behind it run through my mind. The creak from the front door is long and drawn out. It makes something in my chest ache. My father would have fixed that first thing. The afternoon sun hits my eyes, causing me to squint. At first, I could only see her silhouette. Then, my eyes adjusted and I could see the little old lady standing on my porch holding a casserole dish. She's smiling, but it seems wrong. I smile back at her, trying not to seem caught off guard by her presence. Her voice is sweet, but the gravelly tone in the back of her throat, paired with the state of her teeth, tells me that she's a smoker. "Hello, dear. You must be Alice." I hesitate. "Yeah. Sorry. Do I know you?" "Oh, no," she says with a bit of humor in her tone. Word travels around here. I'm not sure I like the way she said that. I'm Jane. I just live a couple houses down. I follow her finger as it points to a small house down the street. She actually has quite the pretty fairy garden put together. She lifts the dish in my direction. "I figured you haven't had much time to get a good meal in your tummy." The casserole is still warm when I accept it from her hands. "Actually," she adds, as if it were an afterthought, "I was curious if you found any work since you got into town." I open my mouth to answer, but she continues. "My daughter Viola lives right around the corner, and she has been in need of a babysitter." "Oh, I don't know if I could." "It would be an easy job for you, dear." "My grandson, Noel, is such a sweet boy. It would be a breeze." I take a second to try and digest all the information. It feels less like she's offering, and more like she's already decided. I mean, I do need a job. I just don't know if I'm the babysitter type. When would they need me to start? As soon as tomorrow would be wonderful. Her smile widens slightly. I can't tell if I want the job for the money, or so Jane will leave me alone. "Okay, I'll be there." She firmly grabs my hand, pulls a pen from her purse, and writes the address on my hand. "Thank you so much, dear. You really are quite the lifesaver." Her grip seems to linger a little too long. I don't pull away, but I'm not sure why. Then she turns to make her way off the porch. I close the door and let out a long breath, leaning back against the wall. I look down at the address on my hand. I make my way over to the sink, turn the faucet on, and grab the soap. I was going to wash it off my hand. For reasons I can't really explain, I don't. The smell of the casserole drifts over, rich and warm enough to make my shoulders relax. She may have made me a little uncomfortable, but without taking a bite, I can tell that woman can cook. My back was sore from sleeping on the futon as I made a cup of coffee. I traced the address on my hand with my finger while listening to the pot drip. My mind is still struggling to catch up with how quickly and matter-of-fact Jane was about offering me this babysitting job. Maybe I shouldn't go. Maybe it really is too good to be true. But to be honest with myself, I have to admit that moving to a new place as spontaneously as I did leads to a need for a quick turnaround in one's financial department. I say screw it and throw on some clothes to make my way to Viola and Noel's place. The morning air is cool as I make my way to the address Jane had given me. When I arrive, I realize that this is easily the nicest house on the block. It's a beautiful 2-story brick home with white pillars holding the porch roof up. It made a slight ping of jealousy shoot through me. The house itself tells me that I'm extremely underdressed in my oversized sweatshirt and joggers. The door opened a split second after I hit the doorbell. The woman who answered is absolutely stunning. Her wavy blonde hair shimmered as the morning sun hit it. She's wearing a sharp, tailored black suit that immediately tells me that she must be important to whatever company she works for. She doesn't look up from her phone when she speaks. "You must be Alice." Noel is in the living room. I walk in the doorway and am mesmerized by their beautiful home. "Oh, okay. Well, it's very nice too. Just make sure you keep an eye on him during the hunt." And with that, she's out the door. The slam of the door causes a vase to shake. What is her problem? I couldn't imagine leaving someone alone with my kid one day without even looking them in the eye. Still baffled by the interaction, I make my way over to the living room to meet Noel. He's right where his mother said he would be. He seems to be about 11 or 12. He has his mom's blonde hair and is wearing a nice pair of jeans and a polo. "Hey there, my name's Alice." "Okay." Noel didn't have the urge to look up from his phone either. I blink. "Well, all right then. So, what's this hunt your mom mentioned?" That got his attention. "It's the spring equinox egg hunt at the library square." I look at him with confusion. "Wasn't that a few weeks ago?" He rolls his eyes as if I had just asked the dumbest question possible. It wasn't ready yet. Something about the way he says it makes me pause. I open my mouth to ask what that even means, then decide that I probably don't want to know. I shake it off and throw my hands up in mock surrender. Sorry. Not my place to question tradition. Noel scoffs as he goes back to whatever he was doing on his phone. I'd say so. Well, do you happen to know what time we're supposed to be there? He stands abruptly, grabbing his jacket off the arm of the couch and a small wicker basket off the coffee table. We should go now. He glances at me. I need to be first. There's no excitement in his voice, just certainty. Noel marches his way towards the door. I hesitate for a second, then follow after him. By the time I make it out the door, he is already halfway down the sidewalk. He isn't moving like a kid about to go on an egg hunt. He moves as if he is about to make his way into battle, and I seem to be the one who is falling behind. Hey, slow down, I call after him. He doesn't. As we make our way down the street, I notice other families heading in the same direction as us. There's no laughter, no talk about candy, no playfulness at all. Everyone seems to be moving with the same purpose as Noel. Why is everyone taking this egg hunt so seriously? I ask as I spectate the crowd of people marching alongside us. Noel looks up at me with a disgusted look, but doesn't care to answer my question. As we approach the town square, nothing seems odd. It's an open courtyard with a stone fountain and a few large oaks. There are some wooden picnic tables set out, along with pastel tablecloths and a few streamers. There are plastic eggs scattered throughout the yard. Even some balloons tied to posts swaying in the breeze. Nothing would look abnormal to any passers-by, but something still feels off. It's quiet. Too quiet. Too quiet. Half the town seems to be here. Parents, grandparents, and obviously children. But no one is really talking. Conversations are short, muted, as if everyone is just waiting for something to start. I notice a few parents glancing in our direction as we walk in. Well, my direction. Not smiling. They're just watching. Like they're waiting for me to do something. I just don't know what. The kids are all gathered near a fairly large rock. It appears to be a memorial of some kind, but I can't make out the words. All of them seem to be scanning the field. At least some of the younger kids seem excited, judging by the way some of them are bouncing on their toes. Noel quickly makes his way over to the group and pushes his way towards the front of the pack, as though he already knows where he needs to be. The silence is heavy in the air. Even the wind seems quieter than it was before, until the clock tower rings. The sound cuts through the silence. That's when the children start making their way into the field, not in a hurry, not laughing, but slow and methodically. Most of the kids begin picking up the plastic eggs and calmly placing them in their baskets, but a handful of the others, including Noel, walk right past them. That was when I noticed a couple dozen spots in the field where there was some loose dirt, places where it looks like someone had filled holes in the ground. Each of them would approach the holes, drop to their knees, and begin digging with their hands. I feel my stomach tighten as I watch. Dirt is caking under their nails, and they don't seem to care. But I couldn't help but notice the disappointment covering their faces before they moved to the next hole. I look around at the other families as they watch intently. No excitement on their faces. No one is even taking pictures as the kids hunt for eggs. But their faces were showing focus, intent, and even a few showing nervousness. It feels less like an egg hunt and more like they're watching a fight in the Coliseum. I watch Noel move from hole to hole, digging and searching for something. The frustration grew on his face as each hole came up empty, until he found it. He dug through one of the patches of dirt, but stopped before it was completely empty. He sat back on his heels, his shoulders relaxed, and stared down at the hole. I watch closely as he reaches in. He pulls something out and carefully places it in his basket. He calmly stood to his feet and made his way over to me. Keep an eye on this for me. He placed the basket at my feet. I'm going to go get some of the other eggs. He didn't seem excited, just done. I could see that Noel had tears welled up in his eyes. I had the feeling to ask him what was wrong, but I was also overwhelmed with confusion. I looked around at the other kids who were digging through loose dirt. They all had heartbroken faces, and a couple even sat there quietly sobbing into their dirt-covered hands. No one goes to them. Their families almost seemed disappointed. I looked into Noel's basket to see what they had been looking so hard for, and in the basket sat an egg. It was a bit bigger than a regular chicken egg, and it had a pretty green tint to it. I picked it up and cupped it in my hands to inspect it. It's warm, and I can feel something moving inside of it. I turn it over in my hands, causing whatever is inside to adjust. That's when the egg began to crack. Every head in the field snaps in my direction. My heart skipped a beat, and I almost dropped the egg. I look around at the glares pointed in my direction. No one looks surprised, but they still seem displeased and a bit shaken. I look out at Noel, who has stopped picking up eggs and stares back at me. He looks shattered, betrayed, angry. He yells across the field at me. "What did you do?" He stomps his way over to me. "You ruined it." You weren't supposed to touch it." Tears begin to run down his dirty cheeks. "It was mine." "You were just supposed to protect it." "Noel, I'm sorry. I just wanted to." He kicked his basket. The wicker shattered on impact. Wicker ribs and loose strands scatter across the grass. In his tantrum, he grabs hold of the pastel tablecloth that rests on the table and tears it off, sending little cups of trail mix and jelly beans flying through the air. "It's all your fucking fault." His vulgar words cause me to freeze as he begins running in the direction of his house. I looked around at the eyes that were watching the confrontation. No one moves. No one says anything. And somehow, it feels like they agree with him. I hurry after Noel. When I make it back to the house, I find that the door is locked. "Noel, open the door." Nothing. "Noel, come on, open up." Again, nothing. Again, nothing. It's just a stupid egg. How about you stop acting like a spoiled little brat and just take the damn thing? I hit the door with my free hand. It doesn't budge. I sit on the front steps and wait. I continue to inspect the cracked egg. It's warm, even warmer than before. The crack has gotten bigger too. Thin lines branching across the shell, like veins. Whatever is in it seems to be slowly making its way out. I can feel a rhythmic beating as I hold it. Thump, 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 thump. I blink hard. Forcing back the forming tears, I turn away to make my way home. I don't go home though. Not yet. I have to see if anyone can help this shitty day make the slightest bit of sense. I pass through Jane's fairy garden and can't help but admire how organized it was put together. I knock on the front door and stare at an ornament of a fairy wearing a purple dress sitting on a lily pad. The door opens. "Alice, what can I help you with, dear?" She looks to either side of the yard. "Is Noel with you?" I lift my head up to look at the old woman. "No. Can I come in? I just need someone to talk to." Her smile makes something in my chest soften. "Of course, dear. Come on in." She gestures for me to sit at the dining table. She joins me after pouring us glasses of water. "Now, tell me what happened." I don't know why I feel so comfortable talking to her. Maybe it's the way she reminds me of my own grandmother. Either way, I tell her everything. It's all been so overwhelming and confusing. I just need the slightest bit of clarity. Jane listens without interruption. She doesn't look confused, doesn't look surprised. She just nods. "That must have been frightening," she says softly. "Jane, what is this thing?" She tilts her head in thought. "It's nothing to be afraid of, dear." My grip tightens around the egg. "Why won't Noel just take it back?" "Because it began hatching with you. It chose you." My stomach drops. "No, I didn't want it. I'm sorry, sweetheart. It just doesn't work that way." She says it like she's explaining the weather. "It's already started." I stare down at the cracking egg. "What do I do now?" "You take care of it." I can't help but chuckle. "What? Like a pet?" She smiles. "Not quite." "I still don't get it." "Noel was heartbroken," I say. "As if I stole it from him." She nods. "Noel has wanted one since he was very little. Why?" Jane shrugs slightly. "Some of them do." For the first time, she glances down at the egg. "Has it started moving yet?" Thump, 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 thump. Thumpa. I don't say anything. I don't have to. Jane nods. Good. The sun is setting as I leave Jane's house. I take a second to take in the beautiful orange and purple light. I breathe in the damp air. I look down at the egg in my hands. Guess it's just me and you, little buddy. When I get home, I make a small nest out of my softest dish towel. I sit at the island and place the egg into the nest. I watch as the shell trembles, something inside adjusting its weight. The movement inside causes it to tip over. So, I try to put it back. When I do, the shell gives beneath my thumb, not cracking, but sliding. A section parts and something looks back at me, an eye, too large. It doesn't blink. I jerk my hand back, causing the egg to fall back on the towel. Suddenly, whatever's inside the egg is truly working to get out. The shell swells outward, folding in on itself as something pushes from the inside. The sound is wet, strained, like something being pulled apart. Then, it slips free, small, wet, trembling. For a second, it lays there completely still. Then it inhales, a sharp, wet breath. Its head tilts, and now it's staring directly at me. It doesn't blink. Hey, little guy. I'm not sure if it's the cutest thing I've ever seen, or if this is the most disturbing thing I've ever witnessed, but it seems to just be a baby chick. Only a little, off. Its eyes stay on me, not the room, not the light, just me, like it's been waiting. I let out a breath. I didn't realize I was holding. Okay, I whisper. You're just a baby chick. It chirps softly, normal. I can't help but let out a chuckle. I also realize that I have zero idea on how to take care of a farm animal. It stands. Too fast, apparently, because its legs begin to wobble for half a second. Then they lock, perfectly still. I tilt my head and immediately realize that it does too. The same way I do. I freeze. It doesn't look away. Not for even a split second. Are chicks supposed to blink? Suddenly, something shifts beneath its feathers. Not on the surface, but deeper. I lean in, squinting. My stomach drops as the skin beneath the feathers bulges and then smooths back out. As if something inside is moving. Okay. Something isn't. It takes a step towards me. Slow and deliberate. It doesn't act like a baby animal. It feels like something that knows who I am and is choosing to come closer. I take a small step back, it follows. Not stumbling or unsure, just matching me. Okay. Something isn't. It takes a step towards me. Nope, I say, forcing a small laugh. It moves again, faster this time. Before I can react, it hops forward, landing on my wrist. Its claws press into my skin. Not sharp enough to break skin, but strong enough to latch on. I try to shake it off, but its grip tightens. It shifts its weight and makes its way higher up on my arm. There's pressure but no pain, as if it's testing me. It lays its body against my arm, and it goes still, completely still. I can feel its chest against my skin. Thump, 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 thump. It inhales, and I feel it. Not just its breath, but something beneath it. A shifting, like whatever is inside of it is adjusting to me. It stays there a second longer, pressed against me, then it chirps again. Soft, familiar. I let out a breath of relief, and then it chirps again, louder this time. Something about it feels wrong. The pitch is off, too stretched. It lets out a third chirp. This time it isn't a quick note, it holds the sound. A drawn-out, wavering noise, as if it doesn't know when to stop. I can feel my chest begin to tighten. A fourth chirp comes, but this time there's something under it. A second sound, quieter, wet, like it's coming from deep inside of it. What was that? It tilts its head and chirps again. Now the sound stutters as it tries to exit. It breaks halfway through, as if it changed its mind on what sound it was trying to make. It turns its head more, not as smoothly. It jerks and stops. Jerks again, and its head is further than it's supposed to go. The shifting under its feathers returns, like something sliding underneath. Then it's as if it begins absorbing patches of feathers, leaving behind a pale gray skin that begins to bulge and boil. I shake my arm, and the chick falls to the tile floor. It seems to convulse on the floor, and a ping of guilt hits me. until I notice that it's beginning to grow. I can hear its tiny bones twisting and adjusting. It causes a small bit of bile to form in my throat. I can't do anything but watch as it tries to find balance on its rapidly growing legs. Once its feet are under it again, it stares into me again. Its large eyes are now clear, yet almost human. It looks at me like it recognizes me, like it's always known me. It opens its beak, too wide. The corners don't hold. Its beak begins to split down the middle, and the sound that comes out isn't a chirp this time. It's wet and strained. I can see the inside of its throat shifting forward, stretching and bending to the shape it prefers. Its skin tightens, then bulges and expands outward in places, like something is trying to make space from the inside. The shriek escaping it makes me cover my ears. It doesn't stay one sound. It's like it warps as it escapes its throat. In a panic, I take off for the front door and sprint down the street. I don't even know where I'm going, but I know I need to get away from whatever was inside that egg. Before I get too far, glass bursts from inside the house, followed by something tearing through the branches above me. I run around the corner and go by Noel's house. I catch a glimpse of him outside on the porch. He notices me as well. "See? You don't even want it," Noel yells out as I run past. I ignore him and I quickly end up back at the town library. I burst inside and drag the doors closed behind me. I curl myself up behind one of the bookcases. I try to quietly catch my breath and listen for any noise outside the building. Thunk. Something lands above me. I can hear its claws scratching against the roof as it paces, trying to find a way in. Then it stops. The silence may be worse than the noise. Suddenly, the front door opens. The slow creak makes my stomach twist. I cover my mouth, forcing myself to stay silent. Something moves down the aisle, slow, searching. I begin crawling towards the front, keeping low beneath the shelves. I reach the end of the aisle and scan around me. There, an emergency exit. But as soon as I stand to make a break for it, something strikes the back of my head, hard. Everything goes black. My head is throbbing. I don't move at first. I try to breathe, but it catches halfway in. The smell of dust, old paper, the library. My eyes spring open, but my limbs move slow. I look over and see the emergency exit from before is now barricaded. I push myself up and my arms shake. The back of my head burns. So, I reach my fingers back and they come back damp. It's still quiet. Too quiet. You're awake. I flinch. He's sitting a few rows back. Noel. A thick wooden leg from a chair rests across his lap. He's just watching me. You shouldn't run from it. His tone is cold. What did you do to me? You were making it harder. He snaps back. Noel stands from his seat and makes his way to the front doors. He grabs the handles and pauses. You have to stop fighting it. It's a privilege to be chosen. He pulls the doors open, letting the outside in. Noel, close the doors. No, Alice. You need to accept it. The air shifts as soon as the doors open. Not a breeze, a presence. I don't move. I don't breathe. Noel doesn't seem to either. A subtle sound comes from outside the doors. A slow drag across the pavement. Noel. He doesn't bother looking at me. Something moves through the moonlight, not fully visible. It stops just outside the doorway. It's about my height. Thin, with parts of it pushing outward. The arms come into view first. They're thin and jointed. It has wing-like edges, feathers clinging to the ends. I can see the small claws that have formed at the tip. The legs are mostly bird-like, but the joints don't settle. Every step bends differently. It doesn't move like an animal. It moves like something still trying to assemble itself. Its bird-like head peeks in as the rest of its body follows. The split in its beak grows wider every time its mouth opens. It clicks its beak open and closed, as if it's using it to listen. It doesn't need to search though. It immediately spots me, like it never lost me. I run. I shove past the shelves, wood scraping my side as I force myself through the narrow aisle. Behind me I hear a sharp crack. It's not following the aisle. It climbs. hooking its limbs over the shelves, pulling itself forward in uneven, jerking bursts. It's too fast and leaps in front of me. I turn the other direction and only take a few steps before I slam into something. Noel. He grabs my arms, holding me in place. "You're ruining it," he exclaims. "Move." I shove him off of me. But it's too late. There's nowhere to go. I'm cornered. I scan the room, desperate for a chance to escape. It opens its mouth. Its beak splits, opening in 4 different directions. Its throat shifts, flowing and constricting as it lets out an ear-piercing screech. I close my eyes, praying. I'm shoved to the ground. I open my eyes, and Noel is now standing between me and this thing. Facing it, he speaks to it. "Please, she doesn't deserve it. Take me." I reach out to him. "Noel, don't do this." He turns to me, fury in his eyes. "You took this from me." He turns back to it. It was supposed to be me. For the first time all night, its stare came off of me. The creature tilts its head. Just as it had when it first came out of the egg, it pauses, as if considering Noel's proposal. His voice is shaky. "Please." He steps forward, then drops to his knees and spreads his arms. This wasn't supposed to be taken from me. Softer. "Thank you for giving it back." It lowers its head, its split beak opening wide. Noel doesn't flinch. It begins to swallow, slowly, not tearing. Taking. I swear I could hear Noel laugh. Soft, relieved. I squeeze my eyes shut tight. The library goes quiet again, completely quiet. I don't move. I don't breathe. When I finally look up, they're gone. No trace of them. Just the open doors of the library. I push myself up off the floor. My limbs are weak and exhausted. I walk outside and make my way over to the memorial rock in the square. The moon lights my surroundings. I don't understand it. I don't think I want to. I look at the memorial rock that I struggled to read this morning. A few dozen names are carved into it. At the bottom, Noel Thompson. Then I hear it thump, 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 thump. I stood in the doorway of my flat, my mouth hanging open as I took in the scene before me. It looked as though a tornado had blown through my home. My TV lay on the floor, its screen shattered. Books, DVDs, and various knickknacks that I owned were scattered across the floorboards. Boxes and cans of food littered the ground, turning the place into a minefield. I took a step in, my shoes crunching on the broken glass and potato chips that covered the tiled entryway. I closed the door behind me, subconsciously taking note that the latch sounded strange as the door clicked into place. I stepped further into the mess, my progress slow as I moved to step lightly over any larger obstacles, making my way to my sleeping quarters. Suddenly, a high-pitched sound pierced the deafening silence as a faint, indeterminate smell met my nose. Beep. I recognized the sound the oven makes to remind me that its current job was completed. My brow furrowed in confusion as an absurd thought wormed its way into my mind. What? Did the burglar warm up some leftovers or something? Suddenly, a cold chill washed over me as I remembered something important. Quickly tiptoeing my way through the mess in my hallway, I reached my bedroom and rushed over to my vanity, some of whose drawers were missing entirely, while others hung open precariously. I flung open my sock drawer, praying silently to myself that my stash of money was still there. It wasn't. I punched the air in frustration, the faint sound of the oven echoing from the scullery. Beep! Another thought occurred to me, and I rushed over to my closet, pulling out the old wicker hamper that contained my dirty laundry. It looked relatively untouched. I reached in and felt around the bottom. Cold steel met my hand, and I sighed with relief as I brought out the lockbox that contained important documents, some valuables, and a handgun. After swiftly inputting the correct combination, I sighed once again with relief as the familiar sight of the box's contents greeted me. I grabbed the handgun, chambering around before closing the lockbox and re-hiding it. I stood up slowly before resuming my search through my residence. I went room to room, checking every space big enough to hide a human. Each room was a mess, but thankfully vacant. After checking the hall closet, another thought struck me. Where was Trebus? Beep. Trebus, my adorable little dachshund, was nowhere to be seen. There was no sign of him as I looked through the residence, nor did I hear any whimpers or growls. Unusual, given how noisy he loved to be. Surely, he would have made a racket if there were an intruder in the home. Then again, he probably ran out when the intruder busted in, which means I'll have to look for him later. I sighed with quiet resignation. My home was broken into and ransacked, and now my dog was missing. Hopefully the neighbors saw something so that I can file a police report. All, sir. Beep. I huffed with frustration as I picked my way through the mess towards the scullery. There, the neon green LCD display glowed, faintly lighting up the dark room. I flicked on the light, taking a step forward before pausing as I wrinkled my nose in disgust. A sickening smell permeated the room, like burnt meat and hair. I gagged, involuntarily shuddering as I nearly doubled over. Pinching the bridge of my nose, I straightened back up and froze. There waited the oven, a single sheet of copy paper taped over the door's window. Written on it in scrawled block letters was the phrase, "Stupid dog, wouldn't shut up." I stood still, the gun in my hand feeling heavy as my heart and mind started to race. No. Please, no. P.T. Trebus, I whined. The oven answered. Beep. It was the summer of 2014. My parents and I were heading to a remote area of the Olympic Peninsula for a summer getaway. We didn't often go on trips, as money was always tight in our family. This year, my parents wanted to do something special for my 13th birthday. I'd always wanted to go camping, and I loved the outdoors, especially the forest. There was something about forests that always fascinated me. Perhaps the mystical feeling that came with entering the thick greenery of the Pacific Northwest. I knew from a young age that trees carry memory. Most trees I saw were older than I was, and I always wondered what their stories were. The forest was my safe place. I never much cared for the concrete jungle. Much like my father, I was, and still am. Very much an introvert, preferring nature over people or anything man. As we pulled up to our camping spot, my heart jumped with glee. I hopped out of our Dodge Caravan and raced into the woods. My mother called after me. Make sure you stay close and get back before dark. I turned and nodded at her while my father began to unload the van. I skipped off through the trees, admiring the wooden giants and the sounds that echoed throughout the woods. Birds singing, cicadas humming, and the occasional twig snap from wildlife. Or so I thought. On my mini-adventure, I found a towering giant. Its trunk looked almost carved out to the perfect size for a child. My height, as if it had grown just for me. I trotted excitedly into the trunk, gazing up, mesmerized by the life inside. Spiders and beetles alike were all taking up residence in this ancient, natural structure. I thought they were beautiful and mesmerizing in every way. I must have spent a good half hour in that tree when silence engulfed the forest. How strange, I thought, as I knew the forest normally grew louder as the night approached. I peeked my head out from the stump, scanning the forest for any life. Silence. The forest went from gleaming with life to looking dull and benign. I stepped out hesitantly. Something wasn't right. Through the silence, a loud, piercing sound echoed through the woods. It was so unexpected I almost jumped out of my skin. It sounded like a chainsaw. I assumed someone must be trimming trees or something, so I didn't think much of it. Again, silence filled the forest, and the sun began to disappear. I remembered my mother's words and began making my way back to our campsite, imagining a pitched tent and a fire ready for marshmallows. Through the darkening forest, I could just barely make out the van and sprinted toward it in excitement. As I approached, I noticed the absence of anything related to camping. The only things unloaded from the van were a cooler and my father's fishing rod, which lay flat on the ground. That struck me as odd, as my father took great pride in his fishing rod. He never just left it on the ground, fearing it would be stepped on and snapped. I looked around the campsite, but my parents were nowhere in sight. "Mom? Dad?" I called, but there was no answer. Fear crawled up my spine as darkness filled the forest and an unbearable silence filled the air. I called for them again, louder but still no answer. I didn't have a phone yet at that age, and normally I wouldn't have needed one. I glanced around and didn't see either of my parents' phones anywhere. We were miles from the nearest person, as the campsites were spaced very comfortably apart to ensure a secluded experience. I opened the van's sliding door and sat in the passenger seat. They must be out collecting wood for the fire, I thought. It was the only logical conclusion I could reach. So, I waited in the van, expecting them to return swiftly. Hours went by. My surroundings were black as ink. My mind started racing, wondering where they were and if something had happened. I scoured the vehicle for a flashlight and found one of our battery-operated lanterns. I switched it on and hesitantly left the safety of the van. There was a small path leading into the woods from our campsite. Thinking maybe they had followed the path and gotten lost, I began down it. There was still no sound other than my footsteps as I reluctantly made my way farther and farther from our campsite. I began calling them again, hoping maybe they'd follow the sound of my voice. It had to be close to midnight by now, but I had no way to tell the time. About 10 minutes down the path, that roaring sound rattled the trees again. The sound of a chainsaw, but closer this time. Who would be cutting trees at this hour? I stopped in my tracks and listened, and then a blood-curdling scream harmonized with the teeth-clenching, mechanized sound. "Mom," I yelled, sure that it was her voice. I'd never heard her scream before, but what other woman would have been this deep into the woods? Stupidly, I ran toward where I heard the heart-wrenching noises. The dark woods fell silent once again, with nothing but my frantic footsteps and shaky voice echoing around me. I realized, far too late, that I had strayed from the path. I stopped and turned my lantern in every direction, but there was no clear path in sight. I was breathing heavily, my body was shaking in absolute terror. Where were my parents? What was that noise? Was that really my mother screaming? Out of the darkness behind me, I heard heavy footsteps heading toward me. I froze, unable to move, and braced myself for the worst. A hand grasped my mouth as I almost let out a scream. A man stepped in front of me and put his finger to his lips, gesturing for me to stay quiet. It was my father. Thank God, I thought, as a feeling of relief washed over me. I wasn't alone anymore. That relief quickly vanished as my eyes met his. I'd never seen such terror in his eyes. As I brought my lantern closer, I noticed blood splattered across his entire being. My eyes mirrored his terror. I whispered, "Dad, what's going on? Where's Mom?" "Follow me slowly and quietly. We have to go now," he replied sternly, though his voice shook with fear. "Where's Mom?" I heard a scream. He cut me off, grabbing me by the shoulders. "Mom will be waiting at the van for us. Let's go." He grabbed my hand, and we attempted to make our way back. We walked slowly, as carefully as we could without snapping any twigs. As minutes turned into hours, it became very apparent, even with my father's guidance, that we were lost. A few yards behind us, we heard a series of branches snap as something barreled toward us at unnatural speeds. My father ripped the lantern from me and looked around frantically. We spotted the hollowed-out tree I had found earlier. He raced me over to it and shoved me into the child-sized gap in the trunk. In the blink of an eye, a black mass swallowed my father and the light in his hand. I covered my mouth with my hands, attempting to stay silent as he had told me. The teeth-grinding, chainsaw sound pierced my eardrums, and a thick, wet substance splattered across my face. The lantern fell to the ground in the middle of the violent attack. And then I saw it. My father, being torn to shreds. Flesh, blood, and bone were flung every which way. My eyes widened and my stomach sank as the light illuminated the black creature. It was tall, like a man, and covered in dark, greasy hair. Not like animal fur, but like a person who hadn't bathed or groomed in years. The hair hung off the creature, dripping with blood. Its claws, which were ripping through my father, were long and human-like, sharp as razors and bony like a skeleton. Its body was shaped like an ape's, but lankier and much larger. Its face, it didn't have one. It was just a skull, resembling a deer's but with the teeth of a predator. Protruding from the skin and hair around its neck, it looked as if a disease had been eating through the flesh of its face. It grasped my father high off his feet, tearing him to pieces in a matter of seconds. My loving father was nothing but a pile of gore scattered across the forest floor. Silence befell the woods once again as the creature huffed in exhaustion, yet carried a lingering energy. It didn't even eat the prey it had just shredded. It was hunting for sport. It was hunting for sport. The lantern began to flicker out as the creature turned its head toward me. My heart pounded against my chest. Tears streamed down my face, and my hands remained clamped over my mouth. I could see my life flash before my eyes. I was sure I was about to join my father in the mess on the ground. Everything went black. I must have passed out from the fear. I didn't expect to wake up. I awoke the next morning with a camp ranger carrying me in a blanket. As I fluttered my eyes open, hoping I had just had a horrible nightmare, the ranger's gaze met mine. He had an awful look of pity and despair. "Where are my parents?" I asked, already knowing the terrible answer. "Authorities are on their way, and we will get to the bottom of it then." Tears flooded my eyes as I recalled the night before. The police identified the attack as a bear mauling. I told them what I had seen over and over, but they looked at me like I was insane. They assumed my imagination had filled in the blanks of a bear attack in the dark. But I knew what happened. I knew what was out there. They found my mother's scattered remains about a mile into the woods. They must have known the attack was unnatural, but I don't blame them for not believing a 13-year-old talking about a beast with a skull for a face and razors for hands. I know I didn't imagine it. That was no bear. To this day, I will not go into the woods because I know that thing is still out there. I promise myself I won't laugh at Dad's funeral. Sitting in front of my mirror, I apply very light makeup. Dad said it was devil's paint. He liked me to look natural. Once I'm satisfied with my chalky look, my cheeks a deep, pallid white resembling a corpse, I move on to my hair. Dad didn't like hair dye. He said it was unnatural, so I spent all night recoloring my hair back to my natural brunette shade. I force a grin, the one Dad liked. I run my hands down my dress as it hangs off me. Dad said showing skin was a sin. Dad said a woman occupies a room to be seen, not heard. Dad said a woman must walk behind her husband, never in front. Dad said a woman must marry a man and have beautiful Christian babies. Dad said women loving women was a cardinal sin, that women should be hung for indecent thoughts. I've had so many indecent thoughts, too many to count. When I was 14, I was sent to a special school where my indecent thoughts were hollowed out of me. A school with bars on the windows. A school with locked doors. A school with chairs featuring Velcro straps. Mandatory movie screenings. Dad said my favorite would be the one where the man and woman live happily ever after and have a beautiful Christian child. But the school wouldn't let me leave. They offered colorful candy that made me stop thinking for days on end. I lost hours staring at the ceiling and trying to find my thoughts, trying to find my tongue. I demanded to speak to my dad. I was 13. Dad would save me, right? Dad would take me home. Just a little longer, he kept saying every time he visited. I believed him. But then I turned 14, and then 15. I missed holidays and vacations. He ignored the blood on my bedsheets from my attempts to kill myself, the restraints pinning my torso and arms. Dad came to see me on my 16th birthday, wiped away my tears, and said, "It's okay, you'll learn how to find a man." Dad said the restraints were needed, that my body wasn't mine. It was God's. Dad ignored my screams for mercy, for forgiveness, when electricity rattled my bones and hemorrhaged my nose, when I was told to bite down on plastic so they could drill the indecency from me. Dad said God didn't forgive me. Dad said he was ashamed of me, ashamed of my indecent thoughts, ashamed of my refusal to accept responsibility for my own actions. I was a bad kid, Daddy said, a devil child who deserved to be punished. When I was 18, I was released. I walked into my father's arms and hugged him. I remember his satisfied grin, his sharp breath in my ear. "Have you learned your lesson, Abkri?" "Abkri, are you still there?" My girlfriend's voice crackles through my phone, which I've forgotten is still pressed to my ear. I place it on my dressing table and pick up a tube of eyeliner, screwing off the lid with trembling fingers. Are you all right? Nan's voice barely grazes my ears as I apply thick, extravagant strokes to my eyes, revel in that red-hot hit of dopamine, and then scrub it away. Dad said my face must always be white, always perfect, like a porcelain doll. I murmur, tying my hair into a dull ponytail. I will miss the pink streaks in my hair, but it's just for one day. Dad said my hair must never spill over my shoulders, always be in a strict, tight ponytail for my husband to tug when punishing me for my disobedience. I shake away his words. I'm good, I say quickly. I'm just getting ready. Nan's sigh explodes through the speaker. Abkri, I'm in the car outside. If anything happens, I'll be waiting. I smile. I love you. Dad said, I love you, was only reserved for my husband. Nan paused before whispering, I love you too. I end the call, check myself over in the mirror, and leave my room. Luani, my sister, is waiting outside. She's pale, shaking. Sculpted in Dad's suit and tie, Luani is a nervous wreck. Dad said Luani was a man through and through, born a man, would always be a man. Luani was sent to the special school to become a man. Luani still had scars on her temples and the backs of her hands, hollow eyes that pretend to be okay. Instead of speaking, I take her clammy hand with a smile. You okay? Luani hesitates, her lip curving slightly. Yeah. Entering the funeral hall in the quiet town of Oakhaven, we meet our brother, Inquo. Dad told Inquo he was sick when he was 12, that euthanasia would be the best course of action. After all, Dad said some children weren't fit to be alive. Inquo was diagnosed with autism at 8 years old. At 10 years old, he was sent to be with the angels. Luckily, Inquo escaped. I pretend I can't sense him trembling when I take his hand, and the three of us stand over Dad's open coffin. It's just us in the room. Family. For a moment, I am silent, staring down at Dad's peaceful face. My gaze lingers on the attempts to cover up the gasping wound in his chest, where I plunged the knife into his heart. Inca breaks after a moment of awkwardness. He breaks into his hands, muffling his grin, trying to suppress his hysterical giggles. Luani is next. She smirks. Doesn't laugh. I don't expect her to. And finally, I break apart. I drop to my knees, and I can't stop myself anymore. I laugh until I'm crying, until I'm wrapped around my siblings, and I'm whole again. I lied. I did fucking laugh at Dad's funeral. This house was cheap because no one wanted to deal with the renovations, but I didn't care. All I needed was my own place and a basement for tools and junk, though I almost never went down there. My girlfriend Valerie stayed over almost every weekend. We'd been together for about 6 months, and everything was going well until one day she asked, "What is that sound?" I heard it too. A dull thumping from the basement, like someone slowly and lazily punching the wall. I didn't remember when it started, maybe a week ago, maybe a month. I thought it was the pipes, or rats. But sometimes the sounds changed. Instead of thumping, there was a shuffling, like someone walking barefoot on the concrete floor. I wanted to check it out, but I kept putting it off. Not because I was scared, but as if my body itself was saying, "Don't." "Pipes," I said. "Or rats. I will check tomorrow." One Sunday, Valerie left early, and I was alone, sitting on the couch and watching football when I heard it again. But this time, it was not thumping or shuffling. Breathing. Heavy, wet, and very loud, like someone breathing right next to my ear. I turned off the TV. The house fell silent, and then it started again. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, exhale. It was like something huge was sleeping under the floor. My heart started pounding. I grabbed a flashlight and finally decided to go. My hand touched the doorknob. It was ice cold, even though the house was warm. The stairs led down into darkness. The flashlight beam showed concrete walls, shelves with tools and boxes. Absolute silence. No sound inside the house or outside, just my heartbeat. I took a few more steps, reached the middle of the staircase, and the flashlight flickered and died. In that same second, something ice cold wrapped around my ankle. It was not a hand, but something long, smooth, and strong. I was yanked downward so hard that I hit my chin on a step. The taste of blood filled my mouth. I screamed, but the sound was cut off as something soft and wet, smelling of earth and rot, clamped over my mouth. Then darkness. I woke up on the concrete floor. The basement door was closed. I rushed up the stairs, pounding and screaming until my voice gave out, but there was no answer. Then I heard my own voice upstairs. It was humming a song, the one I usually hummed while making coffee. I could not breathe. How was this possible? I heard the voice approaching. But when it spoke to me, it was not my voice. It was someone else's. It was hoarse, like its throat had been packed with dirt. Don't do anything stupid, Vardy. If you interfere or try to escape, I will kill your entire family right in front of your eyes. It listed the names of all my relatives. I could not believe it. For the first few days, I thought I would go insane. Upstairs, something was walking around, moving like me, talking like me, living my life. It fed me when no one else was home, like I was its pet. All I could see was its hand, the same mole on the wrist. It would leave food and water and then leave. I heard everything. I heard it talking to my mom. I heard it laughing with my friends. I heard Valeri coming over on weekends. I heard it say, "I love you," in my voice, and her say, "I love you too." I heard what they did together. I lost track of the days. A week, maybe 10 days. I ate, drank, and waited. I found an old screwdriver in the basement and started working on the door hinges. I did a little bit every day while it was quiet upstairs. One evening, I heard Valerie. She was laughing. It was laughing with my laugh. They were sitting in the living room. My girlfriend had no idea that the thing next to her was a monster. "Vardy," Valerie asked, and I could tell from her voice that she was smiling. "How is your head? Is your memory okay now?" "Yeah, babe, no problems." "Shh, do you hear that too?" "What?" "Sounds from the basement?" "It is just the pipes, sweetheart. Or rats." That was the moment the bottom hinge gave way. I threw my weight against the door, and it opened just enough for me to squeeze through. When I ran out, it was sitting on the couch next to Valerie. It looked exactly like me, down to the last freckle. The monster jumped up and put itself between me and Valerie. She was screaming so loudly, I thought her vocal cords would burst. "Who are you?" "What the hell?" The liar said it so convincingly, probably to confuse her. I will not describe what happened next. I will just say that the screwdriver came in handy. I told Valerie everything, standing over the corpse of the thing that had been pretending to be me. It took a long time to prove that I was the real Vardy. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, "I will not go to the police. But I am not coming back to you either. Please do not call me. I cannot blame her." 2 months passed. I fixed the basement door. I tried not to think about what happened, and surprisingly, it worked. I did not think about it at all. Yesterday evening, my friend Kermis came over. We sat in the kitchen, drank beer, and watched the game. Everything was normal. Then Kermis froze. "Dude," he said. "What does that sound?" A sound, like someone lazily hitting a wall or scratching at something, came from the basement. "Pipes," I answered, almost automatically. "Or maybe rats." I am a patrol officer. I work the day shift in a precinct that covers a heavily residential area. We get a lot of noise complaints, minor traffic collisions, and property disputes. We also get a large number of wellness checks. A wellness check is usually called in by a neighbor or a family member who has not heard from someone in a while. Most of the time, the person is just out of town, or their phone broke, or they simply do not want to talk to anyone. Sometimes, we find them injured on the floor after a bad fall, and sometimes we find that they have passed away quietly in their sleep. The call came over the radio just after lunch. Dispatch told me that a resident had called the non-emergency line to report a foul odor coming from the house next door. The caller also mentioned that the homeowner, an elderly man who used to be a medical doctor, had not been seen outside for over a week. The doctor was a known recluse. He never had visitors, never received mail other than utility bills, and only left his property to buy groceries. I acknowledged the call and drove to the address. The house was located at the end of a dead-end street. The exterior of the property was in severe disrepair. The front lawn was completely overgrown, with weeds reaching up to my knees. The paint on the wooden siding was peeling off in large gray strips. The windows were entirely covered from the inside with thick yellowed newspaper, preventing anyone from looking in. I parked my cruiser on the street and walked up the cracked concrete driveway. As soon as I stepped onto the front porch, the smell hit me. It was a heavy, dense odor. If you have been on the job long enough, you learn to recognize the smell of human decomposition. It has a specific, sweet, sickly scent that sticks to the back of your throat. But this smell was different. It had the underlying rot of decay, mixed heavily with the sharp, burning scent of raw ammonia, stagnant water, and molding paper. It smelled like a swamp had been left to bake inside a closed plastic container. I knocked heavily on the front door and announced my presence. I waited 30 seconds. There was no response. I knocked again, louder this time. The house remained completely silent. I reached down and turned the brass doorknob. The lock was not engaged. The door clicked and pushed inward, but it only opened about 6 inches before the wood hit something solid on the other side. I pushed my shoulder against the door, applying my body weight. The obstruction on the other side scraped loudly against the hardwood floor, yielding just enough for me to squeeze my body through the narrow gap. I stepped inside the house and immediately started choking. The air quality inside was terrible. The dust was so thick I could taste it on my tongue. I pulled my flashlight from my duty belt and turned it on. The homeowner was a severe hoarder. The living room did not exist. From the floor all the way up to the ceiling, the entire space was packed tightly with garbage. There were massive, leaning towers of old cardboard boxes, plastic bags filled with rotting food, and piles of broken, unidentifiable furniture. The only way to move through the house was a narrow, claustrophobic tunnel carved through the center of the trash. The tunnel was barely wide enough for a person to walk sideways. The walls of this tunnel were made of tightly compacted stacks of yellowed newspapers. I unholstered my radio and told dispatch that I had made entry, that the house was a severe hoarding situation, and that I was proceeding slowly to locate the homeowner. I stepped into the tunnel. I had to turn my body sideways, keeping my hand resting on the butt of my sidearm to prevent the holster from catching on the debris. The floor beneath my boots was soft and unstable, covered in layers of discarded clothing and wet trash. I called out for the doctor again. My voice was entirely muffled by the sheer volume of garbage absorbing the sound. I moved the beam of my flashlight across the walls of the tunnel as I squeezed forward. Poking out from between the stacks of newspapers and cardboard boxes were pieces of broken retail mannequins. There was a plastic, flesh-colored arm extending across the path. Further down, the bald, featureless head of a mannequin stared blankly at me from a pile of empty tin cans. The plastic limbs were scattered everywhere, buried randomly in the walls of trash, making it look as though dismembered bodies were trapped in the garbage. The layout of the house was impossible to determine. The tunnel wound left and right, completely ignoring the original architecture of the building. I walked deeper into the maze, the smell of ammonia and rot growing stronger with every step. The passageway became tighter. I had to suck my stomach in to push between two massive, leaning pillars of bundled newspapers. As my utility belt scraped against the paper, one of the pillars shifted. The stack collapsed. Hundreds of old newspapers slid down from the ceiling, burying my legs up to my knees and completely blocking the path behind me. Dust billowed up into the narrow space, making my eyes water and forcing me to cough aggressively. I stood still for a moment, waiting for the dust to settle, ensuring the rest of the garbage wall was not going to cave in and bury me alive. I looked down at my boots. The floor was covered in the fallen newspapers. I shined my flashlight on the papers around my legs. The beam caught the bold black ink of a headline. I looked at the newspaper directly next to it. It had the exact same headline. I crouched down slightly, restricted by the narrow walls of the tunnel, and moved the light across the scattered papers. They were not different editions. Every single newspaper that had fallen was the exact same copy. They were all open to the exact same page, all displaying the same article. I focused the beam of my flashlight on the text of the article. The paper was old, brittle, and stained with water damage, but the print was still legible. The article detailed a criminal trial. It told the story of a local medical doctor who had been arrested and charged with manslaughter. The doctor had performed a routine tonsillectomy on a little girl. During the surgery, something went wrong. The child bled to death on the operating table. The prosecution had argued that the doctor was under the influence of narcotics during the procedure and had caused a fatal laceration. However, the article reported that the charges against the doctor were entirely dropped. The blood evidence had been mishandled by the laboratory, and without it, the judge ruled there was a lack of evidence to proceed. The doctor walked free. I read the second half of the column. It detailed the aftermath of the trial. The father of the little girl was completely devastated by the verdict. He had caused a disruption in the courtroom when the dismissal was announced. 2 days after the doctor was released, the grieving father drove his truck to the edge of the large river that cuts through the center of our county. He left his wallet and a suicide note on the driver's seat. The note stated that he could not live in a world where the man who killed his child was allowed to breathe. The police report in the newspaper stated that the father threw himself into the deep, fast-moving currents of the river. The water search teams dragged the river for a week, but they never found his body. The currents were known to pull debris deep underwater and wash it out toward the delta. I stared at the yellowed paper. The doctor living in this house was the man from the article. He had retreated into this hoarding nightmare out of guilt or paranoia, collecting the printed proof of his own ruined life. Before I could stand back up, I heard a sound. It came from deeper inside the house, past the end of the paper tunnel. It was a wet, metallic scraping sound, followed by a low, weak groan. I instantly dropped the newspaper. I drew my service weapon with my right hand and held my flashlight with my left, crossing my wrists in front of me. "Police department," I yelled, my voice harsh in the dusty air. "Call out to me. Are you injured?" There was another weak groan, followed by the sound of something heavy straining against wood. I pushed forward. I kicked the pile of newspapers out of my way and squeezed through the remainder of the trash tunnel. The hallway finally opened up into what used to be a master bedroom. The bedroom was mostly clear of garbage, pushed to the corners of the room. The smell of raw, rotting meat was overpowering here, burning the inside of my nostrils. I pointed my flashlight directly ahead. The elderly doctor was pinned to the far wall of the bedroom. He was wearing a torn, dirty dress shirt and slacks. His arms were spread wide, and his feet were hovering a few inches above the floor. He had been crucified against the drywall. Someone had driven long, thick, industrial metal screws directly through the palms of his hands, pinning them into the wooden studs behind the wall. More screws were driven through his forearms, his shoulders, his thighs, and his ankles. The metal heads of the screws were sunk deep into his flesh. Dark, dried blood stained the wall behind him, running down in long streaks to pool on the floorboards. Fresh, bright red blood was still slowly leaking from the wounds on his chest. He was breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. His head hung forward, his chin resting on his chest. He was alive, but he was completely unconscious, his body going into profound shock. I stepped fully into the room, my boots sticking to the drying blood on the floor. I keyed the microphone attached to the shoulder of my uniform. "Dispatch. I need emergency medical right now. I have a victim with severe trauma, multiple puncture wounds, barely conscious. I need an ambulance on a rush, and I need backup units to secure the perimeter." The dispatcher responded immediately, confirming the request and telling me the units were en route. I kept my weapon raised, sweeping the beam of my flashlight across the dark corners of the bedroom. The closet doors were broken. The window was boarded up with thick plywood. The room appeared empty. I took a step toward the doctor on the wall, intending to check his pulse and see if I could relieve any of the pressure on his pinned limbs without causing him to bleed out. As I shifted my weight, I heard a sound directly behind me. It sounded like wet, heavy meat dragging across the hardwood floor. I froze. I did not turn around immediately. The hair on my arms stood up. My training kicked in, telling my brain to process the audio before moving. The sound was a continuous dragging friction. Then a voice spoke. The voice came from the dark opening of the trash tunnel I had just walked out of. It was a deep, raspy voice. It sounded incredibly wet, as if the speaker's lungs were completely full of fluid. Each word was accompanied by a bubbling, gurgling sound. "I always thought I was a good father," the voice said slowly in the dark. I tightened my grip on my firearm. "That I would not be like mine," the voice continued, ignoring the fact that a police officer was standing in the room. "I won't leave my child. I won't allow the world to be cruel to her. And yet, here I am, a monster like he was." I spun around rapidly, raising my weapon and pointing my flashlight directly into the mouth of the trash tunnel. "Show me your hands," I screamed. "Do it right now." The beam of my flashlight hit the figure standing in the doorway. The rational part of my brain, the part that understands human anatomy, simply stopped functioning. It was a man, but only barely. He was completely barefoot and wearing only a pair of ruined, mud-stained pants that clung tightly to his legs. His entire torso was exposed to the cold air. His skin was not the color of a living human. It was a sickly, pale, translucent gray, severely wrinkled and waterlogged, resembling a corpse that had been submerged in a lake for months. His chest and stomach were covered in deep, jagged cuts. The cuts were not random. They had been carved intentionally into his gray flesh. Two thick, curved slices were positioned high on his chest, resembling closed, smiling eyes. A massive, gaping slice curved across his entire abdomen, curling up at the ends to form a massive, grotesque, smiling mouth. Below one of the eye cuts, a single, deep, teardrop shape had been carved into his ribs. His torso was a smiling face with a tear. Blood and thick water oozed from the wounds. But his arms were the reason my mind broke. His arms did not look like human limbs. They were incredibly, impossibly long. They extended from his shoulders all the way down to the floor, dragging heavily against the wood. The bones inside his arms looked as though they had been broken in dozens of places and left to heal at completely random, unnatural angles. The limbs twisted and coiled like thick, gray ropes. Running down the inside of his forearms, from his elbows to his wrists, his flesh had mutated. The skin was raised in thick, circular ridges. Inside the center of each ridge was a dark, pulsing hole. They were suckers. They were massive, fleshy, octopus-like suckers running down the length of his broken, elongated arms. The suckers continuously expanded and contracted, making wet, popping sounds in the quiet room. I felt bile rise in the back of my throat. I kept my weapon aimed directly at the center of the carved, smiling face on his chest. "Stop right there," I ordered. My voice was shaking. I could not control the tremor in my hands. "Do not take another step. You are severely injured. Emergency medical is on the way. Just stay where you are." The man did not look down at his mangled, twisted arms. He did not seem to feel any pain. He slowly lifted his head, allowing the flashlight beam to hit his face. His facial features were bloated and distorted by water damage, but I recognized him. I recognized the shape of his jaw and his nose from the small, grainy black and white photo printed in the thousands of newspapers scattered in the hallway behind him. He was the father of the little girl, the man who had thrown himself into the river years ago. He took a slow, heavy step forward into the bedroom. His wet, bare feet slapped against the floor. His long, twisted arms dragged behind him, the fleshy suckers gripping and releasing the wood with sticky, tearing noises. "Down below," the father said. His mouth opened, and murky, brown water spilled over his bottom lip, running down his chin. "In the deeps of the river." It offered me a chance. A vengeance, and I took it. He took another step closer. The smell of ammonia and stagnant mud rolling off his body was entirely suffocating. "Stop," I yelled, tightening my finger on the trigger. I will shoot you. Stop walking. He ignored my weapon completely. He looked past me, staring at the unconscious doctor crucified on the drywall. Look what it made me now, the father whispered, his voice cracking with a profound, crushing sorrow. A monster. The fleshy suckers on his forearms flexed violently, grabbing the floorboards and pulling his long arms forward, coiling them near his knees. He turned his eyes back to me. His eyes were milky white, completely blind, yet he looked directly into my face. If I die, the father asked, the water bubbling in his throat, if you kill me now, could I see her in the place she went? He stopped moving. His shoulders began to shake. He was crying, but no tears fell from his white eyes. Only dirty water leaked down his cheeks. But, his voice hitched, transforming into a desperate, frantic panic. What if I went there as the monster I am now? No, I can't die. I can't make her see me like this. The sorrow in his face vanished, replaced instantly by pure feral desperation. He lunged at me. His movement was incredibly fast and completely unnatural. He threw his long, broken arms forward. The massive suckers slammed against the hardwood floor, sticking instantly. He used his arms to violently pull his torso forward, launching his entire body through the air directly at my chest. I did not think. I just reacted. I pulled the trigger of my service weapon. The gunshot was deafening inside the small bedroom. The bright muzzle flash illuminated the room for a fraction of a second. The bullet struck him directly in the center of the chest, right in the middle of the carved, smiling face. The physical impact halted his momentum in the air. He fell hard onto the floor, landing just inches away from my boots. He did not scream. He simply lay there. His long, twisted arms twitched rapidly for a few seconds, the suckers expanding and contracting wildly, trying to find purchase on the wood. Then his body went completely still. A thick pool of dark, muddy blood began to spread rapidly out from under his pale gray torso. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall near the crucified doctor. I kept my weapon aimed at the father on the floor. I stood there, breathing heavily, the ringing in my ears slowly fading. 5 minutes later, I heard the sound of heavy boots crashing through the front door, followed by officers yelling to announce themselves. They pushed through the narrow trash tunnel, finding me standing in the bedroom, my gun still drawn. The paramedics arrived shortly after. They used heavy bolt cutters to shear the heads off the industrial screws, carefully pulling the unconscious doctor off the wall. They managed to stabilize his bleeding and rushed him out to the waiting ambulance. The crime scene technicians secured the bedroom. They placed a tarp over the body of the father. I was escorted outside by my sergeant. He asked me standard protocol questions. He asked if the suspect was armed, if he had charged me, and if I had felt my life was in immediate danger. I answered yes to all the questions. I am currently on administrative leave while the department investigates the shooting. It is standard procedure when an officer discharges a weapon. The preliminary report states that I shot a home invader who had severely tortured the homeowner. They are assuming the suspect was heavily under the influence of synthetic hallucinogens, which they claim accounts for his strange behavior and his physical state. They told me the suspect had likely been living in the river drainage pipes near the property, completely isolated and driven insane by drug use. They explained away the arms by saying the suspect suffered from a severe untreated bone disease and untreated skin infections caused by the dirty water. They are trying to put logic onto something that has no logic. I read the preliminary report, and I just nodded. I did not argue with my sergeant. I did not tell him what the man had said to me. I am sitting here, staring at my blank kitchen wall, trying to process his final words. I keep thinking about the sheer, terrifying implication of what he told me. I shot him. I killed him. If there is an afterlife, I sent him there. I forced him to walk into the light wearing that gray skin, dragging those broken, suckered arms behind him. I just wanted to do a routine wellness check. Now I cannot stop thinking about a little girl running to hug her father, only to find a monster waiting for her in the dark. My roommate's gone. That's not the weird thing. Sometimes she's out with her boyfriend or out partying. But today I came inside and she wasn't there. This was odd because I had heard her talking on her phone before I came in. She was speaking in German, so I wasn't sure what she was saying, but it was her voice, and I could hear the voice of an older woman answering her. I put the key in the lock and she was still talking, but when I turned the key and opened the door, the voice was gone. There is a moment when your brain hears multiple noises where it gets confused. I heard the mixed sound of the key turning in the lock and my roommate talking, and then the door unlocked and she wasn't in the room when the door opened. Maybe she was in another room and I had heard her voice from that. I thought nothing of it for a while. For a few days she wasn't there. Her salad grew more and more wilted in our fridge. Yesterday I was talking to my RA, Stom. He was cooking some sort of Danish food. About an hour into his cooking, while he was boiling noodles, I came into the kitchen behind him and asked if he'd seen my roommate in a while. "Your roommate?" he said in an incredulous voice, turning around with his saucepan of bow tie noodles. "Yeah," I said. "Ellie's. You've seen her." Stom still looked confused, so I continued. "She has long light hair, glasses, freckles. She's German." "Oh." Stom turned back and dumped the noodles into the colander he placed in the sink. "I thought you lived alone." Stom was not the smartest person. Well, he certainly wasn't stupid, but he was bad at putting two and two together. It was really a problem with his memory. If I told him something, chances are he'd forget it in a week. He had met my roommate. I'd see them talking in the kitchen sometimes, or Stom would give her a fist bump if they passed. "You're my RA. How would you not know who my roommate is?" Stom shifted the noodles in the colander back and forth. "I have a lot of residents. You're not even on my hallway." If I could see Stom's face, he would have been grinning. "Well," I said, "I'm worried. I haven't seen her in a while." "Why don't you just text her?" I crossed my arms. "I have. She hasn't responded." Stom fished out the noodles and plated them, and then shook out some Parmesan cheese to put on them. Not very Danish after all. He had long fingers, and his fingernails were bitten. I watched his hands as he got a fork from his cabinet. "She's probably okay," he said lightly, and ushered me to go sit down with him. I sat down, tapping my foot into the carpet. "Yeah, she's probably just with her boyfriend." And that was all the help Stom was, which wasn't very much. I'm not sure if an RA is supposed to do anything in times like this, but he didn't do anything at all. That interaction was only notable for the fact that Stom had forgotten about my roommate. It's not like everyone had forgotten about her or something. My friends remembered me complaining that she didn't turn off the light at night sometimes, or that she would spend hours doing her nails and would fill the room with the smell of polish. But Stom had seen her before. Really, no one else had. Oh, but the really strange thing, the reason why I posted this, is that I found a dog under her bed. She has those long hanging things, like curtains, over her bed, so that it's hard to see under them. This morning, I woke up early because I smelled something bad. The smell was coming from under her bed, so I lifted up the curtains. A dog was under there. It wasn't a creepy dog or anything, just a mutt with short brown fur and a long nose. It was alive, but had been spraying the bed curtains, which accounted for the smell. That was the only evidence that it had been there. The dog was staring at me with beady eyes and its long muzzle, and I wanted to shut the curtains on it. So I did, and I called the campus police. The police advised me to go to a kennel. I don't have a car, so that would be a problem. However, when I opened the curtains back up, the dog was not a dog anymore. There was a carving of a dog there. The carving was somehow slick, sharp, and soft. There were indents where the eyes were, and the tail hung as limp as wood could ever hang. Andy came over after about 5 minutes. His hair was mussed up when I opened the door for him. He must have just woken up. "There's a wooden dog under your roommate's bed?" "Yeah." Stom looked under the bed and took out the dog carving, which I felt must have diminished in size. It fit in the palm of his hand. "That's weird," he said vaguely. "I didn't know Ellie's liked dogs." "Last time I checked, you didn't know Ellie's." "Yeah, I took the dog from him and put it on my desk." "Yeah, I took the dog from him and put it on my desk." And that's where it is at the time I'm writing this. I don't like the dog. I should put it back under my roommate's bed. She'll probably want it when she comes back. But there's something under her covers. I can't see it well in the dark, but there's something in her bed, unmoving.